Gun Rights Radio Network has the best pro-Second Amendment, pro-gun rights podcast available on the net. The podcasts are absolutely free when subscribing using iTunes or Zune Marketplace. Or if you want, you can just listen from the website. Make sure you visit gunrightsradio.com to subscribe. Podcasting freedom, one episode at a time.
Hi, welcome back to Power Factor. I'm Rick.
I'm Steve.
And today we're going to go more in depth into the guns of the specific competitive divisions. We've already covered guns kind of generally when we describe the divisions, and we've also discussed calibers and which are popular within the divisions. Today we're going to go more heavily into gun selection and the features on the specific guns that are better or worse, why guns are more popular, and we'll just kind of run down the different features, and that should help you if you don't already have a gun. Look for the features in a gun that make it good for competition. And if you already have a gun, try to decide, well, maybe I need that widget on my gun. It would be a worthwhile change from the stock situation.
What I should point out here is that we're planning on covering, in terms of episodes here, we're going to cover this episode, which is going to be on IDPA, SSP, and USPSA production. We will cover an episode on IDPA, CDP, and USPSA single stack. We're going to do an episode on revolvers. We'll do an episode on the limited 10, and also an episode on open guns. So at that point, hopefully one of those episodes will fill into, or cover what exactly you have. But my guess is the majority of you are probably looking at typically the production or stock service pistols. Or here like us, we all love 1911s, and you can look forward to that episode.
But we've lumped together production and stock service pistols because the requirements, the mechanical requirements in the two divisions across the two different sports are very similar. It's a division for double action only, or safe action pistols, with or without thumb safeties, with or without hammers, striker fired. But the key feature is that the trigger action is not defined as single action. Although some of the guns have a similar trigger action for all shots, the striker fire guns generally feature a trigger action that will slightly retract the striker before releasing it. So it's technically a double action because it doesn't just release the striker or just release the hammer, which would define a single action pistol. So we have a variety of action types, but they're all generally kind of lumped together as double action.
So in terms of IDPA, though, the single action pistols then fall into the enhanced service pistol, I think.
Or custom defensive pistol, depending on the caliber.
Right. And in terms of non-CDP, the ESPs are going to be, you're typically going to see 1911s or variants of 1911s. The Springfield XD, I think, is going to be shot in that. We're at the Springfield XD is shot in production in USPSA.
Yeah, and that's something we will touch on that, but essentially we're going to go along the lines of action types, benefits you get from it, sights,
right.
Location of controls and whatnot, and how that works within both in terms of the rules as well as how functional it is.
Which one do you want to start out with? We have an assortment here of different various models. We have a SIG P226. We have a H&K P30.
We also have a Glock 34 and a Glock 19. These all are they're all legal for both stock service pistol in IDPA and production in USPSA. But there's certain features, design features, as well as just kind of ergonomics and whatnot that will that kind of determine how popular they are.
Right.
So what are some of the features? Let's start with
let's start briefly about the difference between double action, single action, and safe action type guns. So as an example, the SIG P226 here is a double action, single action gun. The double action is basically that when you pull the trigger provides two actions. It cocks the hammer and it releases the hammer. After that first round's fired, then it becomes a single action gun where the trigger simply drops the hammer on the gun. So that defines a double action, single action. Sometimes you'll see a double action only, where the only thing that happens, the trigger just does that, regardless of the fact that the gun is, the slide cycles the hammer. That's all it does. Every round is fired from a hammer down position. So that would be a double action only gun.
And then the HK is a similar design in that it's also got the double strike capability. You fire it once, you can just pull the trigger. It will continue to fire in double action. But again, like the SIG, each time a round is fired, the hammer's cocked by the slide. So each subsequent shot after firing the first one, you get the single action trigger. And that's usually referred to either as double action, single action, or sometimes it's also referred to as traditional double action, because the earliest double action pistols that were designed back in the 30s operated this way. And it's really probably the least popular action type.
That's true.
Because you have to adapt to two different trigger actions. Your first shot is always going to be hammered down, and each subsequent shot is going to be with a pre-cocked hammer. So you have to have your shooting ability up to snuff with both different. The double action pull is going to be longer and heavier. The single action pull shorter and lighter, and you have to master both if you're going to be effective. And so it's just not a popular action type in any competitive division.
However, a lot of people hate double action only guns where every single pull is a double action pull. And I think that's the attraction of the striker fire guns nowadays, is where the trigger pull is kind of a combination of I shouldn't say a combination, but it's somewhere between double action and single action. It's not as good as a traditional or pure single action trigger, but it's not as bad as a traditional double action only trigger either.
Yeah, but also the double action trigger does have the benefit of being the same for every shot. There's a certain consensus, I think, that mastering a single trigger pull is better than trying to master two. So the double action pull, although it's going to be a longer, heavier pull for each shot, like on a double action revolver, it is going to be the same for each shot, and that consistency is generally thought to be beneficial, as opposed to, even though you've got the lighter, shorter trigger pull on the single action shots that you fire, it's more difficult to overcome the adapting to two different trigger pulls than it is to one pull that maybe isn't as sweet or as light as in the DA.
And that's the beauty of the Glock, though, and the M&P.
If there is actually beauty in the Glock.
That's debatable.
So, Steve, what is it about the trigger action in the Glock that makes it, let's say, not single action, but preferable to the DASA or DAO style?
Right. So this is the Glock 34 here, which is really a fairly specialized pistol in terms of competition. You'll see this in USPSA production, but you'll also see that in IDPA stock service pistol. You won't see that in IPSC production, because IPSC production, they deem pistols that are competitively oriented or designed for competition are illegal.
And so what kind of features does this have that makes it competition?
Right. So in terms of this one here, competition-oriented, it has a extended slide lock. Now, you can argue, and I don't use a traditional slide release on a Glock for releasing the slide. So that's going to hold the slide back. I do not use that to release the slide, primarily because I don't really feel I can get a good grip on that slide release to release the slide, so I use the overhand tug method in cases where I do need to reload the gun, pull back, and do that. So the fact that this is on here, I really don't use it, but the owner of this pistol decided it's something they really did want to use. This is my Glock 19, which I use for carry. My philosophy on this is that since it's a carry gun, I don't want any whiz-bang gadgets on there that are competition-oriented. So it is pretty much completely stock. I've changed the sights. I've changed the connector, which we'll talk about in a bit. But that's pretty much it. That's all the modifications I've done to the gun.
But if you did want to shoot this and thought that having some slightly extended controls are very popular, and all the divisions are just a little bit easier to reach, if I had a Glock 19 and I wanted the benefit of the extended slide stop and the extended mag release, could I put them on this gun?
Yes, you can. And the reason you can put them on that is that because of the fact that in terms of either IDPA or USPSA, the fact that the parts show up on a production gun, in this case the Glock 34, in the family of guns, you can then use the same part on a similar gun in that family. So an example here is that this mag release, now I don't know if the Glock 34 traditionally has an extended mag release or not. But what I can tell you, and there's a really easy way of doing this, you can effectively make an extended mag release by getting the mag release for a Glock 20 or 21, which is a 10 millimeter or 45 caliber large frame Glock, and put that in this gun and turn it into an extended mag release. So in the case of this one here, again, I don't know if the 34 traditionally comes with that. but the owner may have gone that route of using a Glock 20 or 21 mag release. But again, the fact that this part is in one of the other Glock models and is legal, and that model, a Glock 20 or 21, is legal in production, or SSP allows that part to be used in any of the other guns in that family and still be legal.
Yeah, as long as it's a Glock part. That the rules, the idea of it being a production gun or a stock gun means that a number and kind of modifications that are allowed are limited, but they're limited generally in that you cannot buy an aftermarket part that is not offered on that gun from the factory. So there are aftermarket extended triggers and slide stops that aren't legal because they're aftermarket parts. But if it's a factory offered part on one gun, you can transfer it to a different model that doesn't have that part of stock.
And I think that gets into also, in USPSA, they allow you to do limited internal trigger work to the gun. I'm not sure exactly what the rules are in IDPA, but in terms of USPSA, the Glock 34 has a 3.5-pound striker. The fact that it exists in the Glock 34 allows you to put that same, connector, has a 3.5-pound connector. You can put the same 3.5-pound connector in a Glock 19 and still be legal. In fact, it doesn't have to be a Glock part. You can go out and get a Ghost, Ghost connector and put that in a Glock 19 or anything else also and still be legal. So USPSA is pretty specific about what you can do. One of the requirements, at least in terms of trigger work, is that it has to be internal. It can't be externally visible with anything that you've done to the gun.
And same with IDPA. You can swap internal components to improve the trigger pull, but you can't do things like drill a hole in the frame for an over-travel screw or something. Anything that's visible on the outside of the gun isn't allowed. But things like springs and connectors and doodads and gewgaws inside the gun, the technical names for the internal Glock parts, you can change those to lighten or make the reset shorter. There's various, some people, they want to lighten the pull at all costs. They don't care what it does to the feel of the pull as long as it's lighter. Other people say, I'll accept a little bit heavier trigger pull for a little shorter or more positive reset action. Right. And so by fiddling with the connectors and whatnot, and you can mix and match parts to change the trigger characteristics.
Right.
But as long as it's internal parts that don't change the exterior of the gun, you can do a lot of things to improve the trigger on Glocks and the other guns that have similar safe actions.
I should probably point out my philosophy is, since this is my carry gun, is I want to do as minimal as possible that thing because I want it to be reliable. So I haven't changed anything in terms of internal springs or anything like that. It's all stock sprung.